Hello, good morning, everyone, or good evening, or wherever part of the world you may be. All right. So wait for many of you to join. Cameras, yay. All right. So I got many messages after last class, about what's happening next. Um, specifically around like how we're going to do all the review courses, how to be involved. Several of you asked me, well, what should I do? Tell me what to do. And I'm like, excellent. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You know what to do. Come on. So, wherever Anastasia is, she's the one to reach out to who's primarily organizing those courses. There she is. She raised her hand. We just had a spotlight just in case if you don't know her. I'm not sure what house she's in, but I like it. I like her. It's fake. It's imaginary. It's fine. Um, so yeah, so the if you want to help out with those courses, if you want to help out with the reviews, if you would like to help with helping other people finish the courses, please reach out to her. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not ever going to really tell you what to do. That's not how it works. And if you think it works that way, it doesn't. Okay. I'm just a guide, and I can give you ideas. But at the end of the day, it's you and your life that you have to navigate, right? Um, and it's not about what I want, as I want people to take care of other people. I want you to help other people. That's what I want. Um, if there's anything that I wanted, thank you. Nice. So yeah, so reach out to her. There's lots to do. Our goal is to have people in each of the languages leading study groups. So we have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. We have eight languages, which includes English. So that so if you missed the description, I'll tell you again. What we're doing for ACI 16, 17, and 18, instead of doing them as normal courses, where you sit and listen and maybe do your homework, maybe not, maybe think about doing the homework and then feeling guilty that you didn't do it, and then beating yourself up and then judging yourself for being a bad student and thinking you're never going to get anywhere. And half of you are laughing because I'm talking about you. Some of you are looking out the window, pretending not to pay attention. I get it, you know. But the idea is that you all work together. I will teach the review course, of course. Review course, of course. And but we're going to do it differently. We're going to do the review of each course 1 month at a time. So in month one, I will teach the review for ACI 1. And then for the rest of the month, you have to, through the coordination efforts of Anastasia and all those who want to help, you will have the opportunity to listen to the courses again if you would like. And all of my courses are on the platform. You can listen to my courses. You can listen to someone else's courses. You can listen to Geshe Michael's course if you understand English. I don't care. It's not about me. It's about you learning the information and being able to apply it to your life and hopefully make some positive impact and changes. So that's the first thing. And so during that month with the review courses, with the review classes. There's been some ideas tossed around of that even in those review classes that each of the students maybe answers one of the questions and has to teach one of the questions. So that could be a lot of fun, where you get in the groups and Lena has to do ACI 1, class 1, homework number 1. Lena, just let her go. Let him go. you know, so, maybe you'll teach and you'll start getting used to helping each other. And that's the main point. And throughout the year, we're going to start adding other things in, like making sure you're doing your book practice, making sure you're doing your meditations, making sure we might be offering some movement, some yoga or Tai Chi, to kind of get our bodies ready for the more advanced courses, right? Which are much more internal, much more subtle. And I'm trying to decide if I'm going to be really tough about it or not. And you guys can think about it. Oh, Natalia, it's so cute. You can think about it. My thought is that if you don't have your certificate done at the end of the first month for ACI 1, then you can't come to ACI 2. I'm thinking of making it super hardcore, where if you don't get it done in that first month, then you can't come on, then you can't continue on. I don't know. That kind of feels, I don't know, depends what you want. So I'm still thinking about that point. But the point where I will create a boundary is that if they're not done, that as you apply for the advanced teachings, you won't move on. How about that? Okay. And I understand that life happens. And just so you know, like I did get some emails from some people and some messages, which is very sweet. I also am checking you out too. Like it's not just, by the way, the 18 courses are not the only prerequisite for the advanced courses. Okay. Just because you finish them, just because you're asking, just because all those things doesn't mean you're ready yet. All right. And it's a serious thing, right? And it's something that happens in your heart. It happens in the way you practice. So that's why I want to get to know many of you. I want to see what you're like, what's going on. Where can I help you? It's not that I want to be a disciplinarian about it or make it really strict, but I want to make sure that you're ready, because it won't help you if you're not. And if you think you're ready, you're probably not. Get it? you know, and I don't want to be tough and I don't want to be, exclusive and all of those things. And that's why we're doing all of this way. So we don't have to be, right? Every person is on their own journey anyway. So that's my little speech for now. Anastasia Mansurova is managing it. And then really, I don't want to know about it. All that I really want to know is when at the days I'm teaching. And at the beginning of the next month, I want a list of all the people that finished the course. I want a list of all the certificates. And you can just hold them up on your screen and be like, yay, we got it. Marina, if you paid attention in class, you will have known how I evaluate it. So pay attention. It's not a checklist. It's not a have you reached something. It's much more subtle than that. So It basically comes down to your kindness. How kind are you to other people? How kind are you to yourself? And how do you handle negative emotions? No cats. We have dogs. Okay. And how gracefully do you handle it using the understandings of karma and emptiness? That's the basic criteria, basically. But there's certain other things your mind has to be ready for. And we'll talk about it. Don't worry. That's why we have 2.5 years. Okay. That's why we have course 16, 17, and 18. That's why we have Delam courses 1, 2, and 3. It's 2.5 years. Okay. Relax. Be gentle. Gentle, everybody. All right. And it is a lot to do, and it's also not a lot to do. And if you're listening to Geshe Michael's classes, on the Song of My Spiritual Life, if you've been listening throughout these courses, you're actually probably more prepared than you think. Okay. It's all mixed in. It's all there. And then once you realize it, that there is no difference between the two. So you can figure that out on your own. Okay, so the point of all of this comes down to one main thing. Okay, all of this talk, everything we're doing comes down to one main thing. How do we inspire the ideas? And ultimately, how do we...
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes, that too. How do we inspire the ideas? How do we then help other people incorporate them into their life and have the realizations themselves? That's where we left off in the last class, and that's why I started talking about it now, because it's all about, you hear this phrase, ooh, turning the wheel of the Dharma. What the heck does that mean? Like, what does it mean to turn the wheel of the Dharma? It's this weird word that Buddhists use, but what it means is, how do you take your understandings, your realizations, the positive changes you've made in your life, in yourself, and then how do you turn the wheel for others? That's the main point. Like, it's not just about, oh, is my life going to be wonderful? Your life will be wonderful, I promise. Okay. It will also be difficult at points, but that's when you turn more, right? You turn more towards it, not away from it. You see, so the idea really is, how do you do it for others? How do you help other people? Right? There's your main motivation. Okay, if you want a motivation, because that's what it means. It means how to turn it for other people. And so there's this idea, okay, of these beings. They're called chakravartins. All right. And they're so powerful, right? Their karma has become so good, that people are just begging them to teach. Please teach me, please teach me, please teach me, please teach me, right? Please help us. Like, people going for refuge, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, right? But they're going for refuge. They're like, please, 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 please help us, help us, help us, right? Some of them, this comes from the Abhidharma. It's just a description. It's whether they exist or not, you can decide. But metaphors are amazingly powerful to shift the mind. All right. And you've seen it in that there are people in the world that that people are just begging them to teach, right? Some of them were called prophets, right? Different religions had different people that, were begged to teach. They were asked, they were requested, please help, please help, please help. And so there's this cool thing. Okay. They have these like, this is Abhidharma. Okay, this is fun. This is like my, this is probably why my world was obsessed, or still is obsessed, with space travel and aliens, and you know shows where people are in spaceships and doing all these things. That's probably some karma that I have, right? So they call this you know the Chakravartin, someone who rules by the wheel, meaning the turning of the Dharma, right? And so this particular being, you know, they tend, so basically here's the idea. The wheel that they live on, we'll call it a wheel, quotes, is like a big spaceship, flying disc. It's like thousands of miles big, right? Can travel 500,000 miles every single day. It carries the emperor, the Chakravartin, and all the forces, and you know, in order to conquer the unconquered spiritual landscape, right? And so like this wheel enables you to have your own realizations and reach your own goals, mainly the path of seeing. Right. And so these leaders, right, they're close to enlightenment. They might have some of the marks and signs of a Buddha already, right? And what are they doing? They are teaching, right? And what gives them their power, and this is, karmically the most important thing to hear about this. Do these exist? Do these spaceships exist? Do these, you know, do they fly around the universe? And I don't know, you know, maybe you saw one as a kid. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. The point is they get their power from turning the wheel, from teaching. They get their power from teaching. That's how they become leaders, right? So leading others, helping others, supporting others. It's not, you know, get out of your head that it has to be a certain way. It can be a simple thing of the way that you are at dinner with your family, or the way that you talk to your mom when she annoys you for the gazillionth time, right? The people that get under your skin, how do you treat them when all you want to do is just grab them by the neck, right? Which, I've never grabbed them by the neck, but I've told them to shut up. So like, how are you? Like, that's turning the wheel, right? Because you're paying attention to where it's coming from. You're paying attention to why it's happening, right? And then you're showing others how to be in it. You're being an example, right? Maybe you're an example for your kids, your example for your coworkers, your example for the people around you. And then more and more as you turn, that generates the karma, your own karma, right? So you don't have to worry about yourself. That's the best part. You know, the karma sustains you. You don't have to try as hard anymore. Your efforts of doing things become effortless, or more or less effort, right? It's a process. It doesn't just overnight become effortless. But you do less, and then you do more. I was with the kids, with my nephew yesterday. We were playing with this like styrofoam airplane, and it has this little gun, and you put the airplane in it, and you shoot it, right? Then it shoots off, and then you learn how to like angle it properly so it flies the farthest distant, right? And when you're playing with like a 3-year-old, you kind of, eventually start inventing your own games, right? 4-year-old, and then I was like, and then he's like, hey, you can shoot the gun, because I chased after this airplane for like 30 minutes on repeat. Then I started shooting it, and I realized that if I did something a little bit different, I could get the airplane to go further, right? And so you put a little bit of slight effort in, and the result gets a lot larger. So all of a sudden, the plane was like, I figured out how to, the aerodynamics of styrofoam, right? And I was like, I can make this plane go farther, right? Then trying to teach a 4-year-old about it, then the 11-year-old came out, and we all started playing, and then it escalated as it does with boys. It doesn't just like stay in one place, and just kind of escalated. And then we started throwing stuff, and then we started, instead of using the little gun, we started learning how to throw the plane, right? So we're like learning, how to put the right amount of targeted effort in to get the maximum result. And eventually we got this plane to like, from the backyard, would fly and hover all the way across, probably, I don't know, 50 meters, maybe 75. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Definitely pretty far. I mean, we also had the advantage of, once you get it over a certain point, it goes down a hill. So like it, we get to cheat by going down a hill. But we were learning how to, if you put too much effort into it, it would just either, it would take off too fast, and then the aerodynamics would, tilt the nose up, and then the whole thing would just be an airplane. It was like a stall, if you know how to, when you're flying, and then it just falls to the ground. Or it would just go straight up and then come straight down. But eventually we learned that just the right amount of effort at the right, amount, at the right speed, all the right angles, and then the plane would just take off. We also had the advantage that the wind started blowing, blah, 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 blah. That's not the point. Then we started getting turbulence and getting stuck in the tree, and, it escalated. Then it went over the fence, and then we had to go chasing it. Um, but it's the same thing. If you learn where to put the effort, you get the maximum amount of results, right? And that's kind of what what we're trying to do always, especially even conventionally, if you're trying to run a business, or you're trying to run ACI. If you have projects in ACI and you can't get stuff done, or you're trying too hard, maybe you're not putting the effort in the right place. Like, how are you putting the effort in to create the maximum result? And that's what leadership does, is you make one move that affects a lot of different things. And so for those of you, if I haven't made a move yet and you're waiting, it's because I'm trying to affect 10 things or 15 things at the same time. Because otherwise it's a waste of effort. You see? Hey, buddy. Want to see the little cute dog? There he is. Here, you want to go outside? No? We just want pets. Okay. So that's that's the name of the game. So then when you're in this, this 2,000-mile long spaceship, and you're traveling millions of miles a day, and you're turning the Dharma, right? And you have the forces against evil, you write stories about this, fables, right? Are they true or they're not? It doesn't matter. Do they exist? If you can imagine it, probably in some way. But the main point is that, if you're like, just think, if you're a parent, You have all the little kids running around. You have to do things to maximize your efforts. You're only one person or two people, or maybe you have a family helping you, right? It's the same thing. It's the same thing with, the metaphor here of turning the wheel. It's basically, can you, instead of doing x plus 1, can you do 10x? Can you do 20? Can you do 100? They say that when you see emptiness directly, you get, I don't know, 10 emanations, 100. I can't remember the exact number. Then each time, subsequent time, you get more and more and more, right? It's the same thing. Is it absolutely true? I don't know. But it's the increase of power and influence. With great increase, it also becomes greatly, you have to be more responsible, right? You have to become more responsible. Like, how do you lead a 2,000-mile long spaceship, with armies to destroy the evils of the uncharted spiritual territory, right? That's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of lives. It's a lot of minds, you know. And so, what are the two forms of the turning of the wheel? Like, what are the two forms? What are the ways in which it stays? You can go out there. You're fine. So the first way is in the books themselves. So it first turns in the forms of books, lectures, woodblock prints, paper, Zoom calls, MP4s that are stored on a drive, uploaded to the YouTube, learning platforms, the physical form of it. Okay. The physical form is, the preservation of the words that can guide the speech. Let's just reduce it to speech. Okay. But is the speech the Dharma? The words are coming out of this hole in my face. Okay. My face hole, right? Then it kind of goes around, and it's like, let me get this ear out, right? It goes in your ear, right? And then you hear things, right? You hear words come in, and those words have power, right? They have the ability to help you, right? From their own side, right? Right. So the first thing is, like, you have these words that do something, that are supposed to do something. Right. And if you understand them in a certain way, then they do something for you. If you understand them in a different way, hey Jake, you want to come say hi to everybody? You don't want to say hi to all my friends? Are you sure? Okay. Well, if you want to say hi to my friends, you just come over here. He doesn't want to. All right. So those words, does everyone understand the same words? Right. How often have people understood or misunderstood words? I meant the word this way. I heard the words this way. Well, I meant them this way. Or I heard your words mean that, and so I understood it this way. What's the correct meaning of those words? Is there a correct meaning? Right. And then you discuss it and you try to understand what the words really meant. Right. Maybe. Maybe you can come to a resolution, maybe not. Right. But that's the one form. That's where they live. That's where they live there. Right. They live there in those books. But is that where they live? Oh God, where do they live? Do they live in a library? Do they live in your YouTube channel? Oh, I'm going to do the review courses of ACI 16, 17, and 18. Great, perfect. They're going to go live in, they live there. When I haven't finished the course yet. Hey, right? Oh, he was shy. He looked at you. I don't know if you saw him. And so like, how does that, you know, I'm going to do my review courses, therefore that's where they live, right? I'm going to learn the Dharma. I'm going to learn the teachings, right? That's where right. I'm going to go to Mongolia and go to the National Library of Mongolia and get out those old pages. Or I'm going to go to the ACI learning platform, the Five Houses learning platform. And that's where I'm going to learn the truth, right? You know, that's partially accurate, maybe. But the main thing is, where do they live? Is they live in you, in your direct knowledge, in your direct experience, right? All of those books, all of that speech, all of those YouTube views, right? All of those comments, they live in one place, right? If they did something for you to make your life better for yourself and other people, it's in your heart. Like, the realizations are in you. And if the realizations are not in people, it doesn't matter what's in the books. Right. So the idea then is that if you have certain seeds, if you have certain ears to hear it, the speech of the teacher, whether it's in Zoom or YouTube or you picked up a book or, you know, is that it catches your own heart and then it helps transform it. Right. And if it did transform it, change you, that's the whole thing about the idea of a heart teacher. Were you transformed? Yes. And then what's the point of the transformation? Is that then you pass it along to others. Okay. Because if you can't explain it to somebody else through your own lived experience, then it's just words in a library that no one's good. It's just collecting dust and no one will understand. So really becomes this is a whole motivating speech on your seeds, right? It's all motivation on what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to do long term? Right? How far do you want to go? Right. So the idea of oh, Diamond Way, it's about moving the realizations from you to others through your teaching, through your speech, which can only inspire, it can't change. And if the student thinks you're going to change them, the student has misunderstood the teacher. The teacher doesn't do anything for the student. The student does it for the student via the delivery system of a teacher. Okay. The biggest thing that a teacher can do for you, at least mine, is teach me the value of their own impermanence. Even the Buddha taught his own impermanence. Why? Gautama Buddha, the Buddha who showed up in a human form, He died, right? His body died, you see. So how does goodness stay in the world? By good people teaching good people how to be good people. How does evil stay in the world? By teaching people to be evil. You see, it doesn't have to be this big woo-woo spiritual, oh my God, we're going to all like ascend to the 5D reality on the planet that we can't see yet. And then, we'll all live in paradise. Don't think that way. I mean, maybe we will ascend, whatever that means. But what world do you want to be? Simply, what world do you want to live in your legacy? What world do you want to leave behind? You see, and so teaching people about kindness and compassion, and where things are coming from creates a world of good people and a world that teaches unkindness and selfishness and criticism and war and hatred and division. That's a world that we can leave too. Which one do you want to leave? Right. And it starts with the people. It doesn't, so that's what our point is, right? It has to be in your heart. And then your heart then reflects it to others. Right. It becomes a cascade. Books are useful, yes. And it should be written down and you should record everything. Thank you, tech team. Thank you for recording this in 8 languages. 3, 4, 5, 6, right? 8 languages. Okay. Right. So the future people can hear it. And maybe it'll touch someone's heart. Maybe the whole point is in 50 years, someone will listen to a class like this after we're all long gone. And then all of a sudden they have a deep realization on emptiness. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're just all doing it for that next person. Who knows? But that's up to you, right? If that next person comes in the next generation, you have to teach them, right? You have to be like, that was this cool guy back in 2025. Listen to his videos. And he said this weird shit sometimes. You should go listen to it, right? And always talking about it is like spaceships and, bubbles and bananas and cats. And somehow the person just turned, all of a sudden it triggers something in them. Maybe that's why we're doing it. But don't be the one who denies them that opportunity. Because if you don't pass it along, that's the whole point of what we're doing and how we're setting it all up. You have to pass it on in your own unique way, in your own unique form. Maybe it's through just being kind to people. Maybe it's through other modalities like dance or, raising a family or in your office. Where are you gonna release? Where are you gonna turn? What spaceship are you on? It's actually a lot of fun to imagine that you're on a spaceship. Like maybe you are on that spaceship already. You just didn't know it. Uh, don't don't lose connection with reality too much, but maybe just a little bit, because maybe those realities are possible. All right. So in the there's different ways that make sure I got all that correct. Sorry, I just want to make sure I covered everything properly. Yes, got that. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go back to the boring stuff, the different turnings of the wheel, one, two, and three. And to understand, like, how do we understand the relationship between them? And that is, and there's different ways to interpret the relationship between the three different turnings. And we've touched on it somewhat. But we're going to go through it and we're going to hear about it in different ways so you can understand it differently. You can understand the profoundness of why those different turnings are useful. And they're not just useful from the point of view of, oh, it's a historical thing and this is what the Buddha did. It's not that. If you're going to be a Chakravartin, and whether it's this life or next, or many more, or somehow you figure it all out in this lifetime, you know, you have to reach people in different ways. And how you reach them, how you speak with them is going to be the difference between whether they have a realization or not. And do you want to be the person who screwed it up, for other people? And that's why you have to spend the time studying and understanding the different levels of it. I had, different teachers will teach in different ways for different kinds of students. You see, and so here's what I know about it, and this is how I'm teaching, right? But different teachers will say, this is what I know about it, and this is how I'm teaching. You'll be attracted to one versus somebody else, but I had people say to me, you don't really, you know, you don't teach like Geshe Michael, and I'm like, well, first, I'm not Geshe Michael. You know, I aspire to those kinds of realizations, but that's not, I'm not him, right? And I got someone, people were telling me, you don't give us all the definitions. And I said, right, on purpose. I don't do a technical in these ACI courses. I'm not doing a technical read. I'm not reading everything 100%, technically. Am I saying things accurately? Yes. But I've chosen to teach in a certain way for a certain type of student. Now, if you come to my Lam Rim classes and you do the translations, we go through it word by word and we get annoyingly detailed, right? Almost too much. Then I nerd out and you get to see the nerd side of me, you know, so, but I'm saying this not because I'm awesome. Okay. It's a choice. I could be awesome. You might think I'm awesome, and I hope you do. But if you're here long enough, I hope you don't think I'm a jerk, and I hope you don't not like me because you're just wasting your own time. There's plenty of other Dharma teachers out there, right? People who might align more with you. So I do suggest go learn from other people. And then if you're like, yeah, Tim's the guy I want to study with, wonderful. But if Tim's not the guy, then great. I'm happy. Like I'm happy you found someone who works for you, right? It can't be everything for everybody. I mean, aspire to be. That's what a Buddha can be, of course. A Buddha can be everything to everybody. They can emanate in all different forms. But again, they're emanating in different forms for uniqueness of individuals. So are they one or are they many? You can think about it. But how do you teach differently? How do you morph differently? Different students require different things, and I am different with different students. And then they get jealous, and then they get upset. You don't treat me like you treat others. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's true. Your problem, not mine. You want me to treat you like others? Be like others. I don't know. It's your seeds, right? I mean, good or bad. I'm just partially joking, but I'm not, right? Like you teach for what they need, you know. And so the idea of the three turnings being in a certain way, there's different ways of interpreting that. Okay. So, so if we're talking about the first turning of the wheel, right, where he said that nothing or everything has some nature of its own, exists by definition. And people say, oh, that's what he taught in the initial part of his career. And that's where it's like you have to be very careful when you say, oh, he taught first this, and that's what he meant first, right? So therefore, here's the debate. So if what he taught in the initial part of his career is considered the first turning of the wheel, and we all agree that the first turning of the wheel must be something that needs to be interpreted further, then therefore everything he taught at the beginning of his career is the first turning of the wheel. Okay. That's the argument. So everything he taught was the first turning of the wheel in the beginning of his teaching career, correct? What about when he initially taught the first five monks? I only found four. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a picture with five. Right, the first five monks, and he urged them to wear the lower robes in a neat way to make sure that the robes were put on properly. Right, it wasn't just jumbled up. Right, everything was put on well. Is that something you need to interpret further? Okay. He said, guys, can you just like put your robes on nicely? Translation into 2025. Could you iron your t-shirt, please? Can you not just look like you came out of a suitcase? Right? Do we need to interpret it, to understand their true meaning? Maybe a little bit, but frankly, it's not about interpreting based on an understanding of emptiness or not. Mainly. Okay. So we don't necessarily take the first turning of the wheel to be just his initial part of his career. Okay. And then subsequently, we can say, all right, fine. Then therefore, I would be very careful about saying something like that, Marina. Karma blaming other people is very, very difficult. It's very, very subtle. And especially karma blaming your teacher is probably a very terrible karma too. So be very careful with that. So let's take the third turning of the wheel. It happened near the end of his life, okay, later on. So should if we were to if we were, for example, to take the third turning the wheel as literal or figurative, right? Are we talking about everything he taught later in his career, right? So again, here's the thing: if he taught the third turning the wheel in the later of his in the later part of his career, then everything he taught was third turning the wheel. Okay, here we go. Well, let's take his teaching on the summary of vow morality right before he died. Excuse me, he passed into his final nirvana, which is what you say about a high being. Okay. And he taught about appropriate monastic behavior at that point. Do we consider that the third turning of the wheel? Right. And that's where, you just have to think about it. Like, is that the third turning of the wheel? Like a section on vowed morality. Right. And here's the cover from, it's not the same book, but here's the cover of a book that we're publishing very soon on all the nuns, monks, vows that there are, with deep explanations of all of them. So if you're ever thinking about being a monastic, read this book. And actually, if you're not, you still should read it because it gives you a good sense of being careful in the world. Does teaching of morality at the end of his life have anything to do with the third turning of the wheel in terms of how to behave as a monk? Right. So think about, like, so the idea here really is to prove that at the end, that the turnings of the wheel don't necessarily relate to time frames. And while they may have appeared in those orders based on how you decide to order the books, it doesn't necessarily mean anything about when it was taught, but rather what was the content of it? What was the content that was being taught? Because if you listen to most teachings, you're going to hear all three of these mixed together. Or depending on who the students are, you're going to hear a different type of teaching. Okay. And so it's not meant to be this kind of like literal. The three turnings are not meant to be taken literally in the sense of time. Okay. So let's see here. Hold on. Okay, so how do we define them? Now we're going to kind of jump in. How do we define all of these things? Firstly, how does the middle way, since we're talking about mind only, how does the middle way define the three turnings? And it's really important. I mean, if you want to learn all of this, it's really important to write it all down. Like, write down the different divisions, like division ones. Division one, time, early, middle, end. Okay. We just kind of proved that, well, there are examples of sutras in the time period of the first turning that have nothing to do with, making fine distinctions. We just showed that the third turning, the period near the end of his life, has nothing to do with making fine distinctions when we're talking about vowed morality. But that's just one way, right? And then you got to think about, why are there different ways to hear about it? Okay. So the middle way, and this is actually comes from a sutra as well, sutra requested by the king of mystic words. they say, well, look, actually, we should reorder them. It's not 1, 2, and 3. It's actually 1, 3, 2. So the middle way is going to say this. The first turning, we all agree, right? The first turning the wheels on the 4 Arya truths. Great. No, we're not going to combat that. The second one should be the wheel of fine distinctions, right? The one where the Bodhisattva says, hey, Buddha, you didn't make any sense. Of course, it might be weird to put this second if it didn't come until after the second one. Okay. The Buddha didn't speak this one until after he taught the second one. But the way it should be ordered according to the middle way school is, look, order of profundity, profoundness, correctness. Number 1, 4 Arya truths, 6 elements, 12 doors of sense, 18 categories, 5 heaps, all those things. Second, the wheel of fine distinctions, making fine distinctions. Thirdly, then we get to the wheel that nothing exists by definition. So that's one way. A second way of understanding it. Here we go. Here's another way of understanding it. What does this picture mean? Sorry. I love when I have a good picture, but I don't remember what I was talking about. That's why I have notes in them. Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. All right, here's another way of looking at this. And this comes from a monastic from Sarame Monastery, Kedrup Tempa Darge. And he also happens to be the commentator, author of the book that I'm translating on the perfection of wisdom, the dialectical analysis of the perfection of wisdom of the Abhisamaya Alankara. All right, and he's wrote a lot of the monastic textbooks that are still in use today. So he said, look, we need to define the turnings of the wheel based on for whom they were presented. So the first one is time period. Okay. The second version of it is levels of correctness of emptiness, right? Which actually reorders them. The third way is for whom they were presented, the actual disciples themselves. Like when he said the students, like who was there, who was listening, right? So he said, this is Kedrup Tempa Darge. He says that the first turning, meaning we don't disagree which one it is, the first turning is for students who can understand the 3 attributes of the mind-only school as applied to a person, to understand the emptiness of a person. And so this is adjusted to a student of lower capacity. All right. What does that mean? And actually, if you come to the Lam Rim class in an hour, you're going to dive into this point, somewhat. They can, through the 3 attributes, they can understand the simple emptiness as applied to people. Why? Let's take the name Tashi. right? You can, Tashi doesn't come out, is not birthed in the hospital, and Tashi doesn't come out and say, I'm Tashi. And everyone looks at the blob of baby and placenta and all that other stuff and go, oh my God, it's Tashi. We've been waiting for you your entire life. Right? It's not Tashi. The name, the blob of baby is not Tashi from its own side. Right? A couple days later, mom and dad like, clean up the baby and go, oh, look, we're gonna call you Tashi, right? Or we're gonna call you Anna, or we're gonna call you Marisol, right? You're not any of those names from your own side. In fact, you can, you can call your like literally go move to a new country, give yourself a new name, and no one will have any idea that you weren't called that, right? Until like your mom calls and you're just like, they're like, hey, Anastasia, how you doing? And everyone's like, who's Anastasia? you know, I thought you were Tashi, you know. You see, so people can understand that, right? It's a simple emptiness based on the three attributes. And then you go, okay, well, yeah, there's a boy, there's a blob there, there's a baby, there's all of those things are there. Have a good day at work, Maria. Okay, so that's the first understanding. Like basically, they can understand the three attributes. And the first turning was for people who can understand emptiness. Understand this. It's their understanding of emptiness. They can understand emptiness to the point that there's no Tashi who's called Tashi from their own side. There's no Anastasia from her own side, right? And people can grasp that. That's level one, and that's pretty, and that's actually quite profound for most people, right? But most people don't think about it, right? They're not like, oh, you know, Emily could be Roxana, no problem, right? We don't think about it, when you go to, when you go to Starbucks and they're like, what name do you want on your cup? Most people just say Tim. I mean, you know what I mean? You say Roxana or Marina or Francisco, right? And then if you're funny, you put a name on it that when they read it out loud is embarrassing. You can watch those videos on YouTube. They're really funny. And I'm not going to repeat any of them. If you want to learn English jokes, go watch them. I'm sure you have them in your own languages too, right? But most normal people, like even if you use the joke name, the first thing that comes to your mind is you go, I'm Tim. Okay, Tim, right? Or when you go to a foreign country and then they can't understand your name. Like most foreign countries, people can't understand my name. So I have to say my full name and I say Timothy. And they're like, oh, I get it. And then they spell it in all these creative ways, right? But I'm not anything from my own side, right? I could easily be an Anastasia or a Milo, right? Or an Emily, right? I could be any of those things. And that's first level understanding of emptiness. And it's very, very profound because then you start thinking about the names you apply to everything eventually. If you can understand that your name is not your name, then you can start going, well, maybe a chair is not a chair. Well, it's different words in different languages. But then then you can see how that builds one's mind, builds your understanding of emptiness. So if you're trying to lead a student into emptiness, you first want to make sure that they can understand that they aren't Marina from Marina's side. Marina could be anything. We could call her Bob, right? Doesn't matter, right? Oh, well, if that's a boy's name, well, why? Then you go, well, does it have to be a boy's name? We call her Billy. Well, is Billy a boy's name or a girl's name? Well, I don't know. You know, see, and so then all of a sudden your mind starts going, huh, and then maybe you start applying it to other things. And that's the point. You have to understand when you're evaluating what someone can understand. What about their emotions? Then all of a sudden people are like, well, no, I'm just angry. I'm angry. Okay, fine. Then you gotta stop there. Right. You can't be like, oh, that's coming from seeds. No. They're not ready to hear that. If they can't say anger itself is just a name for a certain energy that's in the body, well then, okay, well then you got to let them be angry, right? And then you got to back out. So as a teacher, that's you're learning all this to be a teacher. We're not doing this just to be like pedantic or like historical or like, oh, how do we order these things? It's more important than that. Now, Kedru Tempandarge says, look, all right, so that's the first turning the wheel. The second turning wheel is for a different type of student, who can understand the emptiness of objects without hearing the outcome of the exchange in the third turning. So the second turning is for people who can understand emptiness as it applies to objects without having to make fine distinctions. All right. Which is quite an advanced person, right? But some people just get it. Like you just get it. Now, then the more advanced version of that is that you are both a subject and an object. You are a subjective state of mind looking at yourself. Okay. So first you do the emptiness of people, right? Okay, good. All right. I'm not Tim from my own side. I could have been called Tashi or Anastasia. Great. Could have been called any of those things. Right. Then you go, okay, well, I understand the emptiness of objects. Okay, well, good. All the objects in the world don't exist by definition. Right. Okay. Everyone pick up, point with your left finger. This is how we do turning number 2. Point to one thing in this room that's not coming from your seeds or in your room, right? Then you have to look around, point at different things, look around the room. Is there anything that's not coming from your seeds, right? Then eventually you come to yourself, right? That's second turning. You don't need fine distinctions if you get that. But the depth of it is you're a subject, you're a mind who's looking at itself. You are a subject and an object. Okay. And that's what makes transformation possible. All right, the third turning of the wheel, then, as according to Kedro Tempa Darge, is for the type of students who can't understand the emptiness of objects in the second turning until they hear the outcome of the exchange in the third turning. Right? So they can't get objects right away. So they need to go to the place of fine distinctions where they understand that constructs don't exist by definition. Oh, but dependent things in totality do. Right? So they need a stepping stone. The second level is not clear enough, is not, it's too difficult. The mind isn't ready yet. The heart isn't ready yet. That's fine. So then you go to the third turning to then elevate to the second turning. You see, so so as you study all of these things, and you can see them in all the different ways. You can see them in the way that the middle way sees it, which is by level of correctness, time period, or by level of disciple. Right. And then by understanding and which way is the correct way to look at it, you got to figure that out. Maybe there isn't a correct way. And maybe the reason we're teaching many ways is because having multiple ways of looking at it is the point. But there isn't one way of doing it. So when we're defining these, looking at this in the way of what is the intended outcome? Maria, answer. You come to the Lamrim class where I answer that question there. Maria is asking, can the mind look at itself? We have to understand how the self takes itself to be a self to be able to deny the self that's not coming from seeds. Good luck, translate interpreters. Right? We have to understand the self that's being denied. What would that self be? And there's different ways of looking at it. So come to the next class and you'll get some more of that answer. The way that you take yourself to be a self, the way you say, I am me. Okay. It's related to that. So the whole point of that, of Kedrip Tempa Darge's definitions, really is what is the intended outcome for the student? Right. So when you're teaching, which you all shall be teaching, whether you teach children or teach your partner or teach yourself, is really what am I able to grasp in this moment? What are you able to grasp to move up to the very next level? And so I just want to come back to this point of like, all right, so if we go to the point of, oh, well, the third turning of the wheel happened in his later life, and he talked about bowed morality as he was laying on his right side about to pass into final nirvana. Right. What was the intended outcome of that teaching? That's what this picture is about. And that's why I want to go back to it. Took me a while to get there. And he basically said he gave a presentation on a summary of the entire vowed morality. Everything that you need to know. Right? Vinaya. And then finally, he said, take these principles and apply them to the culture and country in which you live. Okay. So immediately he is giving us, there is an intended outcome, although it's not necessarily about emptiness directly. Right? He's saying, look, here are the ways that you're going to plant good seeds. Here are the ways you're going to plant bad seeds. Now, apply them to your culture. Right? And which means that there are so many different people, different ways of living, different ways of talking, different ways of seeing. that you have to become very, very subtle. I've always felt a little, I don't want to say jealous, but I've been a little like longing to like go to Three Jewels in New York and teach there. Because then you know, we say in English, then I can really let my hair down. Okay. You know, and I could, because that's my culture. Those are my, that's where I didn't grow up quite in New York, but pretty close. You know, and Three Jewels has a culture that's very similar to me, like the people, like the way of life, the way of thinking, the way of interacting with people, not just on a Dharma level, but just a style of life. So, but that style is cultural and country specific, somewhat. So when you're applying this to a class that has one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight languages, and probably, I don't know, Francisco, get up the Francisco, if you're still there, can you get up the country map thing? Right. We're going to see where we're all from. You know, then all of a sudden we have this, how do we apply it across cultures and how do we apply it across time? Right. Like if I'm speaking to a group of New York three jewelers in Three Jewels, I'm probably going to be a lot different than I am talking to eight different languages in probably 16 countries, 20 countries. Am I hiding myself? Am I not being the true self? Think about it. I would say no, as in, like, there is a true self that's coming out right now. I also speak in a particular, in a particular way in these classes. We have interpreters. I try to use simpler vocabulary. I try to say things except when I get excited and then Roxana tells me I need to slow down. Okay. All right, Francisco, put it up. Here we go. Now, everybody in the chat, type where you're from. And we're going to figure this out right now, or where you are right now. Okay. I like seeing how many people are from Romania. That's awesome. You guys are kicking ass over there. Okay. Oh, we got someone from South Africa. That's awesome. Okay. You see, so apply teachings, right? Apply them for a particular country, a particular culture. I'm not from all of those places. I've been to most of those places. Not all of them. I haven't been to South Africa. And I don't think I've been to, I think I saw Belarus. I'm not from there. Never been there. Yeah. Okay. I've been to most of those places. Oh, nice. Thank you. Okay, cool. Perfect. So I've been to a lot of those places, right? Does that make me, you know, does that make me like fit to like speak in everyone's language and culture, right? That's why we have interpreters, first of all. But secondly, like, fit the message for the people, you know, letting my hair down, like, does that necessarily help everybody? Maybe, maybe not, you know, but don't worry, you'll get to see all that if you stick around in the next couple of years. Anyway, okay. So, but the idea is being skillful to the people who are there, who like what's going to help people the most. And then by helping people the most, is that you being the most authentic you? I think that's a good question to ask yourself. How can you be the most authentic you and help others? That's another interesting question. And then thinking about how you, like, what does it mean to be a you, to be a self? Who are you? That's another good question to ask yourself, right? And these, what makes you a you, and what's the most important thing to pay attention to when you're helping other people? Are you sacrificing yourself to help people? Because if you're doing that, then you're not helping yourself, or are you? These are good questions to ask. Like, I'm sure parents deal with this all the time. Like, I have to take care of this blob that runs around and screams and yells and plays the same game over and over again for an hour. I love my nephew. You know, am I sacrificing myself to play with him for an hour? Right. I get an hour, right? I don't have to do the day, every day thing, you know. So is that me? Right. And who's the me who's doing that? And why are you doing it? And I think those are all very important questions. So going back to the third turning, and we're trying to figure out, well, why did the Buddha teach the third turning of the wheel? So there were three main goals. And this is the key. This one is key for all of Buddhist teachings, is that you don't take at face value any statement that all things exist by definition or no things exist by definition. And then you apply the test of gold, which we learned in the first day. The test of gold of whether you is cut, file, melt, right? I think those are the three. Anything you hear, you need to look at. You need to look at and be like, should I believe what was just said to me? Oh, just because he's the teacher, just because he's the executive director of ACI, therefore you should believe me, right? Or maybe you should think differently about it. So you would need to test it yourself. This is why when people ask me what they should do, I can't answer the question most of the time. You know, you have to test it out for yourself. What's going to work best for you? So that's the first outcome, is that you need to learn how to think through all of it yourself and determine which belief system works for you. And quite honestly, if you go through all of it, you'll be able to recognize that the belief, like the understanding of emptiness, will shift throughout different times of the day or the hour or the minute. And so to be able to recognize the view that's coming up can help you push yourself up the ladder. All right. The second outcome was that what we've already learned over and over again, that constructs don't exist by definition, right? Constructs are imaginary things. Dependent things in totality do exist. Great. And so in this photograph, in this picture, you can see it's like constructing the world, right? Here's the kind of projector that's going out, and that's things that are, the names and forms and things that are coming from your mind are coming up. And then finally the goal was to provide an effective way of understanding emptiness, to make it efficient, to kind of get to certain understandings. Because if you get to certain understandings, it can unlock more. By understanding algebra, you can understand calculus. Understanding how your mind works in a way that's not completely accurate, but accurate enough, can get you to the next step. Right? So understanding that dependent things lack non-existent constructs is their emptiness. Dependent things minus constructs equals totality. Kunta. Shenwang's minus Kuntak's equal Youngtroops. You see. So he wanted us to understand those three things. One, don't believe anything I say. You need to figure out what it means. Secondly, that the names and labels are constructed by our minds. And then this is an efficient way to understand emptiness, a stepping stone. Understand that, then you can unlock more. It's like, it's unlocking the next level in the video game. Okay. We've covered most of this. Well, there's one major subject left that we'll talk about again. We talked about it way earlier. I think ACI 2 maybe it was. We talked about the Buddha nature, and we'll talk about that in the next class on Thursday. Yay! Thanks for joining today. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. And we'll take about a half-hour break if you want to stick around for Lam Rim teachings. We're going into the different ways that a self can take itself to be itself. And then from there, we can start understanding what we actually deny when we're denying the gotcha thing that you thought that was there that's not. All right, come back in a half hour. Wonderful to see you, and say goodbye to each other.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Tim.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye
much.
bye.
Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Watching
Thank you,
FC.
Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Gracias, Rotimi. Por favor, quédate.
Hi.
Cảm ơn thầy.
Thank you for teaching. Goodbye, everyone.
Con thầy.